Welcome to the Elokus podcast. And this is class number 4 in the discourse 2, which is the 11th discourse in the great book B'Shosh Dimu 5672. And this is going to be class number 2 in chapter 42. Now, last class, if you see, it was marked class number 3 of chapter 41, but since we concluded chapter 41 and we went into chapter 42, it's both. Last class was the last class in 41 and the first class of 42. So this class is class number 2 of chapter 42 in the overall book, and it is the 4th class in this discourse, Tzion b'mishpat Tipadeh. We are clarifying and learning and getting in a beautiful and rich, wonderful understanding on the difference between Chachma and Bina, of wisdom and understanding, the two intellectual experiences of the intellect, and how the experience of Chachma, although the Chachma is the ability to take something in, to take in an idea, to take in a truth into your being, into your consciousness. And there's various different levels of how Chachma takes it in. The higher levels of Chachma we learned is through vision. The mind can see it, can see the truth. We're soon going to see that that's a very lofty level. I mean, a very, very great thinker and a very, very deep thinker. I wouldn't be surprised if Albert Einstein or people like that had these experiences of like thinking so deeply into things until they come to a sharp, ability. They see it in their mind's eye. Definitely our great sages had these experiences, like we discussed earlier. How Rav had such an experience where he saw the truth, and there's no question that our Rabbi and soon had these experiences, and we're soon going to see that the great Kabbalist, the Arizal, had a phenomenal mind. However, plain and still within the experience of Chachma, that is also taking in certain truths. It's not through vision, but it's that the truth itself that we're learning over here in the discourse. So one second, on this level, the lower level of Chachma, there is a certain element of intellectualism, because when it's a vision, it's not intellectualism. You're seeing. It is no element of logic and I don't want to use the word grasp, because even the lower level of Chachma is not grasp, but it's not in the realm of logic. It's beyond logic. The lower levels of Chachma, which we called really earlier the Yesod element of Chachma, where Chachma is able to take an idea and transmit it to Bina. So the lower levels of Chachma, which is what we mostly experience when we experience of Chachma, is we get the point of an idea. When we're experiencing that, he says, primarily, it's not coming into our consciousness in a logical way. In other words, we can't even begin. We don't even have the seed of explaining why it is this way. What's happening is that a certain truth, we're just empty and allowing the truth to settle in. He uses the word hanacha. Hanacha means it lays itself into our soul. It lays itself into our brain. It lays itself into the space that we opened up for it. In other words, it drops into our mind. It drops in. The truth has just dropped into the head. That's the epiphany. The epiphany is the moment a higher or an unknown reality to me or to us or to whoever it is that it's experiencing this until this moment has now entered in and laid itself into your consciousness. Now, you don't even have an explanation to it. The external element of this is because the external element of this inlay of this idea is that you get somewhat of a very brief general form of logic that forms as the crust to kind of serve as a seed that you can then pass over to the Bina. The essence of it is not the logic, because logic already is always description. And description is always external to something. Here we're not dealing with description, we're dealing with the external features of the truth. So even when the Chachma is cooking this idea and like pass it over to slide it down its chute, to slide it into the Bina territory, the way the Chachma inlay that has laid itself out, what he called it's like this deep something lit up conviction that you're that again, it's not seeing it, but that truth of that inner conviction of what it really is not transmittable. What you are transmitting is, as we saying, there's like this outer crust that crusts itself on it, that is giving somewhat, as mentioned, a very brief, non-detailed description. And that element of the Chachma, which is the chitzonius, the very external element of the experience, that is what Chachma prepares for Bina to chew on. And Bina starts chewing on that external element of it and brings it into a full-fledged description, and about it, 3-sentence, 5-paragraph, 10-chapter explanation, whatever it is, whatever the Bina will do with it, will run with it. But as far as the Bina is chewing on it and developing it and fully developing it, the Bina remains in the dark in as much as the essence of it. That's what we were learning last week. So therefore, this is what he was proving, is that Chachma is another world than Bina. Although Chachma and Bina always are together, and all the information of Chachma passes into Bina, and Bina can then take the point of Chachma, but even the point of Chachma that Chachma is giving into Bina is not the essence of what the real Chachma experience is. Going back to what we were learning in the last chapter, that's the reason that we say that the connection of Chachma to Bina is ayin to yesh. Chachma remains in a state of ayin. Ayin means nothingness, and Bina is something. And the way the yesh relates to the ayin is that to the yesh, to the something, the ayin always remains hidden and elusive. You're going to say, what do you mean? How can you say the Bina doesn't know the Chachma? The entire Bina experience, the real oomph. I don't have any other words. The real oomph of the Chachma, the real aha of the Chachma, the Bina is not getting it. And the last thing we were learning, this will explain the reason why we find the phenomenon that happens to people always when you learn and you study, is when you have an epiphany, you're racking your brain on something, you're trying to understand some new concept or whatever it is. Finally, it flashes in your head. You have a Chachma experience, and it's clear. It's so clear. In other words, the pain that you were feeling and the frustration that you were feeling, that you had this idea, you knew it's true, let's say because the Talmud says so, or the Chassidus says so, it's true, but you have like 15 contradictions to it. It doesn't make sense with this. It doesn't, and therefore you realize that you're getting it wrong, that your entire take on this subject is you're not understanding it for its full truth. So you're perturbed and you're bothered, and sometimes it can make a person crazy. And you're trying and you're concentrating and you're hitting a wall, and finally, boom. And when that light suddenly came in, you felt such relief, because you feel everything is good. Preparing it to go into your Bina, and suddenly you're again in the dark. It's just, you don't understand how this really answers all the questions. You have this like vague idea of this new insight, but you're still feeling like it's The clarity that you had the first moment is not there anymore, and now you're in a fog, and the questions are still bothering you. You know that this truth, this deeper understanding is the truth. I mean, sometimes you go and you test it, and you found that you're barking up the wrong tree. It wasn't the truth. But we're talking a case result. But yet there is this momentary or sometimes period of time where, although you had the clarity of the truth and everything was so clear, when you're trying to like digest it and understand it, it's again problematic. The reason for that is because the inner part of Chachma is where you had that clarity, but in the chitzonius of the Chachma, with the Bina, which is the logic element of the Chachma, where the Bina is going to be working with, the light has not illuminated yet so far that logic. You haven't developed that's the way of remedying it. The way of remedying is try to recapture again that, go back into that deep concentration, let go of like what you know now, empty your head again, but then drive back to the space, because hopefully you didn't lose it yet, and you'll get back into the inner pneumius of it, and it will shine again. You will hopefully be able to exit that, have that chachma, deeper light, exit the nucleus of it, and enter into what is it called? When there's a nucleus and there is the protons and electrons that are going around it, right? I forgot what it's called. So you're going to be able to like shine that outer crust. It always remains separated from it, but because it's such a powerful light, it can illuminate that outer circle and add more clarity to it, that you can then clarify it in your head and say, this idea does answer. So now I'm getting more light. I'm able to see, and from there you can take it into your bina and make sense out of it. This is what we were learning last week. So in the last class, let's see over here. Let's see the problem we just discussed. I'm going to go back to V'ha'etza. What is the advice when you find yourself in this situation? Sheyekasher atzmoi oida pam. You need to bind yourself another time. Ezol zich zutragen. He says in Yiddish, you should pull yourself over again. El oimek upnimiyas inyan. Get back to the depth and innermost of the idea. As it was initially. Bahanocha sichlis. In the original, when it fell into your mind, go back to that above explanation, just that purity of the idea. Try to get back to that space. You should feel more. That inlay of the idea should be felt more than the logic of the idea. Get back into the inner purity of the idea. Now, although, remember, this purity of the idea does not get translated into the logical explanations and definitely will not go into the bina, and that's why it's called ayin, nothingness to the bina. The bina cannot process this. However, what it does do is this leg from them seichel, as he calls it, this hanacha, this laying in of the idea as it is in its purity, can give more power and more luminance into the logic that is forming around it. And this gives more power in the intellect, and then it can develop it more in the logical realm for it to come to, and even then enter the analytical side of the brain that really needs to latch itself on to details and to properties and so on and so forth. But now it can come to an understanding of Bina, lahasik, to apprehend, kol masha be'efshar lahasik be'inyan. Everything you're able to comprehend in the lahasik, to reach be'inyan and the inyan, in the idea. And like it is known. Now, who says that strengthening this above logic point, like what is to prove? He wants to bring now that even though that's above logic, it's able to illuminate and light up even the logic. Maybe, again, especially since we're saying earlier that this level of appreciation, this inner light, remains outside of the Bina all the time. So how do we know that it can contribute? What's the proof that it can contribute to the actual Bina? So he says, I'll prove it to you, he says, from the even a more loftier level of Chachma. Remember, we mentioned earlier, and we spoke about it today, that the higher experience of Chachma that not everybody even attains, that only very great people have, is to have a vision where they can actually see it with their mind's eye, like we are seeing something physically. With their mind of their eye, they can actually see the concept as crisp as you see something. That experience for sure is utterly above the world of Bina, which is considered hearing, not seeing, right? And yet, we know that that Riyah, that vision, let's say someone sees it once, if they see it again a second time or something like that, can help their Bina and give them words and explanations in their own mind to understand it themselves and then to share it with others. Although this Riyah always remains above that, the world of Bina and so on. He's going to bring a proof to that. It can like the vision of Chachma, and where the essence of the matter, the essence of that any given truth, phenomenon, or whatever it is shining, which is utterly beyond grasping. Even though it's utterly beyond grasping. You see, the lower level of Chachma is beyond grasping, but not utterly beyond grasping. Because the lower level of Chachma at least forms a crust of some kind of a logic. The higher level of vision of Chachma is still so lofty, there's no crust of logic there at all. Yet, if even that level, by having that, can give more illuminance in the understanding, not always. Rav, as we discussed earlier, had this vision, and then later he couldn't explain it at all. He had questions, and he didn't answer, but he still knew. He had a conviction that this is the truth, because he saw it in the minds of his eyes, although he hasn't yet Bina-sized it. He hasn't yet dissected it in his Bina, and in his Bina it was still problematic. He can still see it. He was absolutely sure that this is the truth of God's will, of the concept in Torah. But yet, even though it's possible for it not to work itself out with the Bina, but definitely in many cases, this illuminance of Chachma does eventually enter in the Bina and add not its inner light, but it empowers the Bina to have a clearer Bina. This vision adds strength in the later experience of haskala, of the intellectual element of it. Gamke. What does that mean? What it will do is the fact that you've seen it with the minds of your eyes, it's going to create that the innovative, the world of not even Bina, the lower part of Chachma, which is where the Nevi'as HaChachma happens, which means it's the spring from where like powerful epiphanies come flowing into the consciousness, like new ideas, flashes. So the fact that you saw something, you had that vision, it empowers this, that suddenly there's like brilliant lights below vision. It's not vision. but insights of chachma that come with an intensity. Your brain, what I'm looking for is your brainstorming. It enhances the brainstorming that you'll, in this subject that you've seen it, you'll come up with brainstorm, with explanations, with ideas that will like illuminate on a mind level, which of course then later can translate into the Bina. Where do we find something? Who says so? Like it says in Priyetz Chaim by the Arizal, by the great and saintly Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, 16th century greatest Kabbalist living in Tzfat. What does it say by him, by the Arizal? Shebeshinas Tzarayim, the Shabbos Kodesh, that one time on Shabbos in the afternoon he took a nap. Right, he merited, his neshama, his soul saw the Parshas Balak, in the Torah portion of Balak, Ubilam, and the Parsha of Bilam, he had such vision and such comprehension and such light that he saw hidden in the Torah in his sleep. He was shown in explanations, deep mystical ideas of Parshas that related to that Torah portion, divine ideas, that if he would want to unpack that to his students and give them what he saw, he said it would take him 80 years. 80 years. So first of all, we have to take a breath over here. Do you know that the entire Kizvei Arizal, everything we have from the Arizal taught and downloaded to his students in less than 2 years? The Arizal came to Tzfat sometime in the early 1570s, maybe a little earlier, maybe in the 1560s. He was a quiet tzaddik in the background. And the great rabbi and mystic, the leader of the Kabbalists, was Ramosha Cordovero, known as the Ramak. When the Ramak passed away, the Ramak said, "The one that will see the beam of light on my kever, on my aron, on my casket when they're taking me to my burial, that's the one who's the next leader." And the Arizal saw it, and they knew, and the Arizal took over, and the Arizal lived for another less than 2 years. And during that time, he taught everything we have on Kabbalah from the Arizal from less than 2 years. Now imagine, the Arizal says that what he gained in his mind in one Shabbos afternoon nap, what was shown to him, would take him 80 years to translate that to his students. You can imagine. What of the Arizal did not make it onto paper, did not make it to us? Our entire Kabbalah that we're all learning, everything is all based on the year and a half of Torah of the Ari. I mean, that always just blows my mind of how tiny, infinitesimal what our knowledge is compared to what's out there. In any case, ube'emes, but the Rebbe Rashab says like this. This was obviously a vision of Chachma. He saw something. It's like a prophetic type of a vision. He's seeing something. We learned earlier that Chachman is ayin, especially the higher level of Chachman is completely ayin, nothing. It never goes into Bina. You can't transmit that. So that means that even in 80 years, he would not be able to transmit it. Ube'emes, and therefore he says, Gam bizman peishana. This is Gaval. Even in 80 years, lo yaya megala masha rabazeh. He would not be able to reveal what he saw, because what he saw remains his. What you see, you can't give over to it. You can give over externality of it, but not what you've seen. Kiariya, because vision, ube'etzem amohus, is an essence, especially when you're seeing the divine. This is not something that can come to any kind of grasp. So why is he saying that in 80 years? So why is he even talking about teaching? He should say, I'm sorry, guys. Because actually what happened was one of his students woke him up because it was time to daven mincha. Rabbi Avram Alevi was the name of the student, and the Arizal was upset at him. Why'd you wake me up? I was doing pretty well in my nap. Like I had an uncle who once went into a temper tantrum. My grandmother tells me the story when he was a kid. It woke him up, whatever, And he says, in my dream, they were about to reveal to me when Mashiach is coming, and you woke me up now. It's probably a kid who didn't want to go to school. It told his parent that you woke me up. I was gonna have, if you wouldn't have wake me up, I would have known the secret of when Mashiach is coming. Anyway, but this is what our Rizal said so. So, but what is he even talking about 80 years of talking if this is not transmittable? The answer is true. What he saw then, he couldn't even give in 80 years. But his Bina, what he could give, what he could teach, was so enhanced by what his vision was that he has 80 years of classes to give to his students, 80 years of download of Bina, new information. Yet true, it's never capturing the essence of what he saw, but there is another 80 semesters. You imagine that? 80 years, more than the time. He's able to download from what he taught. Through seeing, having this vision, Gama Haskala, so also the brainstorming, then the lower on this level, which is the lower part of Chachma, which is the brainstorming of where the epiphanies happen, which are more intellectual. But even them are more, Uba-Omek Yoser are deeper. And now, from there, the external of that goes into the Bina, and that would give him all this new information. Perek, and look what we're going to explain future, chapter 267. We have a long way to get there. We're only holding in chapter 42. I hope everybody remembers when we get to chapter 267 that we once learned about that, like 7 years before. And so just like it is when it comes to the higher level, the vision of Chachma, so the same is on the lower level. Our level of Chachma, when we have a brainstorm, when we have an epiphany, where a certain truth like just enters our mind, a certain clarity of something, just like, so even though the essence of that is not transmittable, but by going back to that and just silencing the mind and allowing that light to shine, it helps the outer element, the seichel element, the intellect, the logical element to become more luminance, and as a result of that, the bina, it brings the clarity in the bina as well. The anacha sichlis is in essence above grasping. Because the inlay of the intellectual thing, is similar to the vision of Chachma. However, it's on a lower level of it. Vision is above logic completely. It's utterly above the logical element. Even though we're not talking about a vision of the eye, like prophet who can literally see something, but it's more like a vision of the Chachma. It's not a vision of a prophet. Prophets can actually see it like as if they're looking with their eyes. This is a mind type of so it has to do with the moichin, it has to do with the intellect. So, which would seem that it does keep it to a certain degree close to the world of intelligence. Ula asid, that only in the days of Mashiach, we're going to actually be able to see, like with our physical eyes, like the physical eye, God will be so revealed at the time of the redemption that we can see it physically. Nevertheless, so that is, but Riyah, in general, Riyah, vision, is completely beyond intellect. But the lower level of Chachma, which is when it just registers in your seichel, harehu b'seichel, it is in intellect. The main thing over here is not the logic of it. The main thing is, it's like this deep inner light that is shining in you. It's like it just feels right. It's settling that this is the truth. When you can get back to that deep conviction and deep inlay of the soul, when when you're not understanding it so well, so then moisav koyach gam b'hasichli. It's adding strength also in the intellectual side of it, which is what is grasped in bina, and therefore by going back to this clarity and to this light, it helps clarify the logic of it, and then the bina is able to adapt this new idea into its worldview and rearrange the furniture of the brain to like accommodate this new concept, and then everything fits like a puzzle perfectly with this new idea, with this deeper understanding. Ukamai. Now, this idea that what he's really saying over here is that there's three levels. There is Bina, which is full intellectual grasp. There is Riyah, the Chachma, the vision of Chachma, that is utterly beyond Seichel. It's like you're seeing something. And then there is the lower element of Chachma, which is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's also like an intake where something is coming into you as is. And so it's also above intellect, logic, but it's already dabbling in the logic. It's already close to logic. So it's like it's straddling the above logic point. That's the lower part of Chacham. The external part of it is the logic. The internal part is still above, utterly, completely above the logic. And he's going to say that you see that. You find that there is many concepts of intelligence, amukim v'nifloim, that are very deep and wondrous, shehen l'mayla ma'hasaga, they're beyond grasp, u'makom makom yesh lahem makom b'seichel gabei chachamim. Wise people, like the wise people, the intellectuals accept it. They don't have the full scientific method to prove it, but it's very much likely in their minds that this is the way it is. What is that? That's the stage of Chachma. It's there, but it's not there. It's not settling it. Similar to Rav's experience. But Rav's experience was much higher. It was a Riyah that did not come down lower. And a lot of times you have intellectuals, great intellectuals and great thinkers, they can't really anchor it down and bring it into Bina, but they all are in agreement that so and such it probably is. So he says, Yesh makam b'seichel. It's not on that lofty level of seeing it. Ki einam b'madregezu, because these scientists or these great thinkers, they're not on this level like Rav or on Albert Einstein, let's say. Again, I'm not sure on which level he was in terms of Reuven. I can imagine one of the sharpest minds. Ki einam b'madregezu d'b'chinas riyah. They're not on that level of being able to see it, but it's pretty close. V'gam dezeh sheyesh la makom u'b'seichel lo rak b'derech esamtus deriyah. And also, this that to these people is that intellectually it feels that way to these individuals is in a manner of esamtus, meaning it feels true. I know it's true. But I don't have an understanding. It's not seichel. This comes from the inlay of chachma. The ima yosha zehu sichli, even though it belongs in the realm of seichel of intelligence, ikraihu b'b'chinas hanacha. It's primarily mainly it's lying itself down, loy b'b'chinas hasaga, not in a manner of grasping. For that reason, even though they can't prove it, it has space to accept things that are beyond the grasp. Through their acceptance, their openness to this space, Eventually, a lot of times, these ideas that were sitting above the heads of the scientists, eventually someone pulls it down and finds words and explanations, and the other scientists agree, and suddenly it starts like fitting into the mind of the intellectuals, into the Bina as well. Okay. Let's leave it over here, and Be'ezras Hashem, next class will continue.